is a nightmare. Man, that's the way it seems. Life is a nightmare.
Welcome to Today in Horrible History, your daily moment of historical misfortune. For February 5th, 2022, we head back to February 5th, 1885. On that date, King Leopold II of Belgium managed to gain control of the Congo and embarked on one of the worst campaigns of torture and greed in human history. This is some truly horrible history. In the late 19th century, most of Africa was controlled by European powers. There were some areas of Central Africa up the Congo River which Europeans had not yet managed to penetrate and control. Belgium was a relatively minor power, but King Leopold had big plans for an exploitation colony. Leopold organized an association he said was for the civilization and benefit of African peoples, and made himself its head. Over a period of years, he lied to the European powers of France, Germany, Britain, and Portugal as to what his intents were for the region and what his terms of trade with the rest of Europe would be. Leopold likened Africa to a cake and stated he'd like a big slice of it for Belgium. Beginning on this date in 1885, Europe allowed Leopold to set up a colony in Congo. But in many ways it was like no colony Europe had run before, as the Congo Free State, as it was known, one of the worst named places ever, neither free nor really a state, was not at all set up as a possession of Belgium in their colonial system, but as King Leopold's personal property. He owned it. He basically owned the people. And the aim of that property was to produce rubber for the world's growing industrial base. This was before synthetic rubber was invented, and natural rubber had to be harvested as sap in a grueling process on plantations. Most of the population of interior Africa became Leopold's slaves in rubber production, all while Leopold told the world that the Africans on his personal property were being Christianized and uplifted. This was supplemented by a horrific ivory trade which required killing untold numbers of elephants, and was run with the same slavery brutality. For the next few decades, the population of the Congo was subject to some of the most grotesque slavery in known history. People were forced to work by a brutal army of international mercenaries and Africans from across the continent put together by the Belgians. This was called the force publique. The force was augmented over the years by Congolese men who were raised in brutal orphanages by nuns, trained from a young age in what amounted to child slavery to become members of the force publique. It's difficult to overstate how inhumane conditions were for most of the population. There was a quota for the amount of rubber each person was supposed to collect, and failure to meet that quota was typically dealt with by cutting off limbs. The lasting image of the Congo Free State is of millions of mutilated Africans, many missing one or both hands and sometimes a foot. This 1904 photo was captioned as being a photo of a man looking at a foot and a hand of his 5-year-old daughter, who was butchered because he failed to produce enough rubber. It's claimed the force publique ate the rest of her. The list of known and suspected atrocities is long. Common stories include huge piles of severed hands and corpses of Congolese who revolted being nailed up in public places in the form of a cross as a warning to others. Nice little Christian touch there. Congolese were also regularly whipped by the force publique members using short whips made from rhino or hippo hide, levels of brutality on top of each other. No one knows how many died, but estimates in the 10 million to 20 million range are deemed decent guesstimates. As if this weren't enough, Belgium also went to war in the Congo's interior against Zanzibar-based slave traders in the interior, who they saw as stealing their workers, and that was just unsporting. Belgium also had the challenge of staving off British colonial superstar Cecil Rhodes, who attempted to take borderlands in the south of Congo for Britain. Leopold essentially gambled his personal wealth and much of that of the Belgian state on the success of the so-called Free State. As stories leaked out as to the atrocities, which were considered even a bit much by colonial standards, and conditions were popularized by the publication, for example, of Joseph Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness, international opposition grew. Famous figures around the world, including Mark Twain, wrote and spoke out against Leopold's insane project. Eventually, in 1908, Belgium caved to international pressure and integrated the so-called Free State into their normal colonial system, returning it to a normal background level of awful. In 1964, it became independent at long last in the wave of anti-colonial movements which technically freed much of Africa. Technically. The West wasn't finished meddling in Congo, a subject for another day. Today the country is the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a good deal of it is still disordered from those years of chaos and brutality. It's not the sort of thing you recover from overnight. Belgium has a colonial museum which still treats their colonization of Africa as a positive accomplishment. In recent years, this has been at the center of debate in Belgian society, and as symbols like statues of Leopold and his generals are attacked in protest, many are coming down. In many ways, Leopold is still with us. One final note, one of Leopold's 4 children was Princess Stephanie, the widow from this channel's video on the Meyerling incident posted last week. That video will be linked at the end of this one. It's a small world after all. It's a small, small world. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Today in Horrible History. Remember that after a brief visit, the rest of your day can only seem better in comparison.
Life is a nightmare, and that's the way it seems. Life is a nightmare.